So with the NBA first round finally coming to a conclusion, we have found out a lot of things about a lot of the aging stars of the NBA, a lot of the young rising stars, and some of the gentlemen in between. But the ones we're going to focus on in today's video revolves around the one and only Devin Booker, who is said to be the leader and the number one option for this Phoenix Suns team that just quite honestly laid an egg against a very tough Timberwolves squad. It is important to understand that the Timberwolves squad was the number one rated defense coming into the playoffs and stand to uphold that title, considering the fact that they have a very strong sense of team defense that is anchored obviously by Rudy Gobert in the paint, but also has guys like Alexander Walker, Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, and Jaden McDaniels helping protect the exterior so that things don't just get instantly funneled into him and forcing him to do extra work. It was easy to understand that the Phoenix Suns did not want to see the Timberwolves in the playoffs, but for a lot of fans, they still thought that Phoenix was going to end up handling business against this young Timberwolves team. Because admittedly, while Anthony Edwards does tend to look the part, he's still a young guy, and when young guys are the engine for your core, it oftentimes doesn't end up panning out the way that a lot of teams expect it to. But much to my delight, I ended up being properly correct about this Phoenix Suns team with all of their issues, whether it be injuries, the depth, or just a situation of defense, because ultimately they were unable to stop the Timberwolves. And the Timberwolves aren't exactly the greatest offensive team on the planet. However, Devin Booker is our point of emphasis today, and we're going to see how he could potentially be viewed as not being the number one shooting guard in the NBA at this current moment. Let's go ahead and get into this one. Now, just for reference, we're going to go ahead and focus on the year-by-year analytics, specifically this season, in which case Anthony Edwards, the man in question to have taken the throne from Devin Booker, ended up playing in 79 games and starting in 78 of them. He played 35 minutes, scored 25.9 points per game to go along with 5.4 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.5 blocks, and 3.1 turnovers per game, shooting 46.1% from the field and 35.7% from the three-point line to go along with 83.6% from the free throw line. All in all, he ended up putting together a 57.5 true shooting percentage. Devin Booker, meanwhile, ended up playing in 68 games and started in all 68 of those. Now, he played 36 minutes per game, scoring 27.1 points to go along with 4.5 rebounds, 6.7 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.4 blocks, 2.6 turnovers, shooting 49% from the field and 36% from the three-point line to go along with 88.6% from the free throw line, and an overall true shooting percentage of 61.1%. Now, it's important to understand that the true shooting metrics lean towards Anthony Edwards, obviously, and he also managed to score slightly more points, but overall it was pretty negligible. The thing that really sets Anthony Edwards apart in my eyes is the mentality that he takes to the game. Remember, Devin Booker spent a lot of time in the NBA before Chris Paul came over and joined him and ended up making the Phoenix Suns into a playoff team. For the longest time, Devin Booker was a promising young star who never sniffed the playoffs. So in my eyes, you can never become the number one shooting guard, or you cannot be regarded as such if your skill set prevents you from being able to, at the very least, send your team into the playoffs or give them an automatic lock-in bid. But that didn't happen until CP3 got there. Now, admittedly, they had a few good years, a couple years where they ended up coming up short, and one year where they ended up making the finals, but Giannis went nuclear and ended up giving Milwaukee their championship. So Phoenix is still without one to their name. Afterwards, though, once Chris Paul ended up eventually getting traded away, he was brought in the healthy commodity of Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. I had a significant issue with this rotation. I had an issue with being so top heavy, and while they did have some interesting depth pieces below, they weren't the right ones to cover the holes and the gaps that they necessarily needed. And because defense was going to be so problematic for them, and the health of their big stars, as we saw, they missed a significant number of games, but the most importantly being Bradley Beal, who missed almost half of the season, things just didn't end up panning out the way that they were supposed to. Now, they met in the first round of the playoffs, and honestly, Devin Booker got handled. He played a good game and he did particularly well in the elimination game, but Anthony Edwards and company were just too much for him to bear hold. He ended up playing in all 4 games, averaging 27.5 points per game while playing in 41.5 minutes per game. He ended up averaging 3.3 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.8 steals, 0.3 blocks, 2.8 turnovers. He ended up shooting 49.2% from the field on 16.3 shot attempts and also 35% from 3 on 5 shot attempts. He ended up going 95.1% from the free throw line on 10.3 attempts per game and still managed to put together a box score plus minus of a -46. When you look at Anthony Edwards though, the person that in my eyes has been the #1 shooting guard in the league and probably was rivaled by Donovan Mitchell rather than Bradley Beal, things get a little bit more interesting. He played and scored 31 points per game in all 4 games. To go along with that, he put together 39.4 minutes of play, grabbing 8 rebounds, 6.3 assists, 2 steals, 0.8 blocks, 4 turnovers, and also shot 51.2% from the field on 20.5 field goal attempts and shot 43.8% from the three-point line on 8 three-point attempts to go along with 83.9% shooting from the free throw line on 7.8 attempts. All in all, his box score plus minus was an incredible plus 60. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Edwards single-handedly showed why he is the #1 shooting guard in the league and why Devin Booker is absolutely not that case. Did Devin Booker play a phenomenal series for the most part? Yes, he did a pretty smashing job, if I do say so myself. But all in all, the defense wasn't completely up to par. Offensively, there was a lot of settling. There was a lot of mid-rangers and not a significant number of threes. Mind you, Anthony Edwards is known for getting to the cup and shooting jumpers, but he was never really known for shooting a significant number of threes, though he can shoot them at roughly a 36% clip during the regular season. He found himself in a situation where not only did he shoot 8 threes per game, but that ended up being 3 more three-point attempts than Devin Booker was getting off, and he hit it at almost a 9% increase in percentage. So all in all, Anthony Edwards was the better player. He averaged more rebounds, he averaged more assists, he averaged more steals, and he averaged more blocks. Unfortunately, he did average slightly more turnovers, but overall, when your shooting splits match up and are just significantly over the other opposing #1 option, when you're supposed to be the #1 option for your team, it puts you into a position where it looks like you're outplaying him. And that's exactly what he did. He passed the eye test. He had the mentality. He had the energy. He was chirping all series long. He was letting them know that he was there to stay, and this was the player that he was going to be. His guys didn't come to fool around. They came to play lockdown team defense. They came to get the ball in their sets and score the rock efficiently on offense. And also put on a show for the crowd and the other fans that were watching from across the globe. Just to put a little bit of seasoning on top of things, we should compare their best and worst games. I would arguably say that Anthony Edwards' worst game ended up being his second game of the series on the 23rd of April, where he played 38 minutes and scored 15 points to go along with 5 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals, 1 block, and 3 turnovers. Now, he shot 25% from the field, 33% from 3, and 87.5% from the free throw line. All in all, he still had a good game overall by most metrical categories because he ended up with a box score plus minus of a plus 15 despite playing in 38 minutes. Comparing that to Devin Booker's worst game of the series, and honestly, he gave us a couple to look at, but the one that stands out the most would be the initial game that allowed Phoenix to really show that they just weren't that team coming into this series. He ended up playing in 38 minutes, scored 18 points, had 2 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, 1 turnover, and shot 31% from the field, 33% from 3, and shot 100% from the free throw line on 6 attempts, and managed a box score plus minus of a -15 in that time period. Now that we've gotten those numbers out of the way from their worst games, just looking at their points, rebounds, and assists from their other games, you see a stark difference. Going for Anthony Edwards, it goes 33-9-6, 36-9-5, and then in the finale, 49-6. Now, mind you, in all 3 of those games I told you those numbers from, he also shot 58% from the field, 52% from the field, and 56% from the field. Also giving him a combined box score plus minus of a plus 45 in those 3 games. Devin Booker, meanwhile, ended up putting together stat lines of 23-5, 23-3-8, and finally in the finale, he went off and showed the star player that we all believed him to be, putting together 49-5-6. And in his games, he shot 46% from the field, 53% from the field, and 62% from the field. And his overall box score plus minus was a negative 33. Now, a lot of people feel as though it's not fair to go ahead and just put one playoff series as the mainstay evidence for one player being better than another player, or one run in the playoffs being the thing that separates two players. And I do understand that. That does have a significant amount of merit. But when you consider how significantly close their numbers were in the regular season and how Anthony Edwards just passes the eye test more, he looks like he wants to win. He hasn't been carried by anybody. He has been the carrier and the leader of his teams. It stands to reason that he's going to be the reason why that team is successful, and he's the engine that makes it go. Going into the playoffs, we had the matchup that we really wanted to see. Yes, Donovan Mitchell is a great shooting guard, but at the same time, he's struggling to deal with Paolo Banchero and the Magic at the moment. If he ends up losing the series, then it really leaves nothing to be talked about, because while he is a phenomenal player, he would have an obvious ceiling. Meanwhile, you have Anthony Edwards, who's great on defense and great on offense. Devin Booker's pretty solid on defense nowadays and is great on offense, but his offensive firepower against Anthony Edwards head-to-head, and in particular when he was guarded by Jaden McDaniels, was not enough. The man was getting clamped up left and right, and there was nothing he could do to stop anybody from putting a pause on him. And honestly, I love to watch it, because Devin Booker might be one of the only star-ish players in the league that finds himself to be excused from so many conversations about blame and issues and problematic play, and just conversations such as those. So when you find a situation where he has to show the dog that is within, and he gets out-dogged by the younger player, and Ant's an animal, it makes things a lot easier to put things into context, because we have 4 games of over 150 minutes of play between both players going head-to-head against it, and you see how they both react against each other's teams. Even when it wasn't head-to-head Devin Booker at Anthony Edwards or Anthony Edwards at Devin Booker, how they dealt with help defense, how they dealt with pick and roll coverages, how they shot the ball, how they commanded the pace of the game on offense and defense, and how they communicated on both sides of the ball. There are stark differences, and this just goes to show there's levels to this thing. Admittedly, Devin Booker did not have a terrible series, and I don't want that to be the mainstay thing. But Devin Booker's playstyle is not conducive to as much success as Anthony Edwards is. Anthony Edwards benefits from having the better constructed team, and maybe in another world, we see that situation flipped on its head, and both of them put with similar roster construction, maybe Devin Booker does play a better series. But we don't have that luxury of knowing that right now, and so for that reasoning, I'm gonna lean towards the young man that's coming up, Anthony Edwards. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know how the series surprised you, because I know that most people did not think that the Phoenix Suns were going to get swept, though many people might have thought they would have lost. Perhaps they thought more of a gentleman's sweep, maybe 7 games, maybe 6. Who's to say? You guys let me know. With that being said, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications, and become a member to help support the content. Or just drop a super chat or a donation. With that being said, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this video. As always, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.